cancer jokes, or I hope you get terminal cancer. And at this point, like, I used to be as ignorant as them. I used to do it every single day. And I'm not like shit talking on them. It's just like it's literal facts that you're ignorant if you know, are joking and telling somebody to get something that's so horrible. And yeah, so I'm just gonna like get into it. So on October 31st, um, right as I was actually uploading my Shake It 2 edit or whatever, my mom had called me into my room, or to the living room, and it told me that my dad has esophageal cancer. So, we didn't think of it. I mean, my mom was freaking out, but I just didn't have any feelings towards it, really, because I just felt like he was going to be fine. And he even told me that. He's like, are you scared? I'm not scared. And I could tell he was just petrified. He was terrified of it. He knew something bad was going to happen. And he had actually told me that he would not take the chemo. Even, like, no matter what, he was not going to do the chemo. And, he was fine up until he, actually ended up doing the chemo. And until, like, a few weeks or, like, maybe a month after, I found out that the doctor had actually not recommended chemo, but he just got it done anyway. So, because he was always like that, no matter what, he was just gonna get it done, no matter the cost, it didn't matter. And so he had taken the chemo, and he had a little thing in his arm. It was a needle, and then there was all this stuff, and there was a little vial or whatever that had the chemo in it. Now, what chemo actually does is it's supposed to go in and kill all of the cancer cells, all of the bad cells, to do that, and the radiation is to try to make the tumor smaller, like shrink it. So he had done the chemo. It wasn't too bad. I think he did he did the radiation, and then on the second dose of chemo, that's when he started to say, like, no, I gotta get off of this. Like, I have to stop doing chemo. I can't do this. So he had ended up doing it, a second dose, and we didn't really think too much of it until he started to fall down. One of his legs, I think it was his left leg, would start giving out. He would, like, he would fall to the floor. Like, I was out here just playing my game, and I guess he was in the bathroom, and he fell. He just fell, and then he got up again, and he was in my parents' room or whatever, my mom's room, and he had fallen again, and he couldn't get any, like, sort of thing to hang on to, so he fell straight to the ground, because his leg had started, kind of like swelling up, because chemo, not only does it kill the cancer cells, but it also kills every cell. It kills anything. That's why it's bad. That's why people lose hair when they have chemo. That's why, your skin starts to turn yellow. And, yeah, so he had started to fall down. This one time I was watching YouTube, and I hear him, like, I heard him, his car, so I was like, oh, he's home. And then he came back in, and he was, like, holding his elbow, and I was like, what's wrong? And I guess he was going up to the front door, and he fell again. So we knew that was really bad. He started to just feel a lot more down, I guess, and then he had ended up going to his work, like he always did. His work was his life. That's what my mom said. Like, literally, without his work, he was nothing. And he had told his work that he would never retire. Never, ever, ever retire. And he kept his promise after 38 years with the Marriott, which is a hotel. That's how I always went to all these different, like, all these vacations in different countries, is because my dad worked at a Marriott, so we got it free because he was part of the Quarter Century Club, which is 25 years working there, which is a quarter of a century, obviously. So he got free hotels and stuff, like he could stay anywhere for free. And yeah, but then one of the days he was in there, and he had been assigned a cane, but he did not bring it to work because he was 99% ego, as my mom said. Literally, he could not. He didn't have, there was no way in hell he was going into work with a cane until they had told him that we think you should lay off. We think you should just fight this, not come to work until you're fully ready. And he said, I'll come in with a cane. I'll do whatever it takes, but I'm not leaving. And, so he had then he was out of commission, so until June 24th. I think that was the date. Then he could go back, and he was like, I'll get through this. I'll go back to work on June 24th. I'll be all good. And he was so confident because the doctor then told him he had 6 months to a year to live. So we were at least happy about that. It's like, hey, 6 months to a year. But the only thing is that the chemo started to get so much, it was impacting him so much. He was just starting to become so weak. And out of all of this, I don't think I cried once through this until it started to get super, super bad. The second dose of chemo started to get really, really bad. His mouth was so dry, and with the cancer, he could not touch or drink anything cold, or it would give this shock like sensation, like as if you touched like a phone, whatever, one of those like phone lines or whatever. Like it would give him a shock. So he couldn't do that. And then he started to feel so much weaker. He couldn't do too much. He could drive, but he couldn't walk. So then he would just basically just stay in bed all day. Watching TV, falling asleep. It's like really all he did. Then we had to get him a little, not a wheelchair, but kind of like something like that for him to rest his leg on, and he could like just push around with his other leg so that he'd be able to move around. But he didn't want to do that, and he refused to get a wheelchair, of course, because he had an ego and he didn't want anything like that. He always wanted to remain strong no matter what happened. And then it started to get extremely bad. He didn't have any motivation to do anything. He would literally just sit on the couch. He'd just be there, just lying down, and already looked lifeless. He looked like he was he was done. So he got off the chemo. They had taken him off the chemo. The only thing is that the chemo takes a few months to get out of his system. And he had been having sick days, so he would throw up like 100 times a day, at least. That's probably a lot. Like, that's probably over exaggerated, but I feel like it was, because there wasn't one day through that week where he wasn't in the bathroom the entire day. He would vomit all over his shirts and stuff like that. And then even when he had nothing left in him, he had vomited everything he ate, he would still be like dry heaving. He would still throw up, but he would be throwing up nothing. That's how bad it was. So he had vomit bags and stuff, and it was horrible. And then he started to become incontinent, I think that is. I'm not sure. I completely forgot. But it means that he can't control when he either pees or poops, so he would just go at any time. It didn't matter. That was really sad. Like, I was in the bathroom once, and he wanted to go to the bathroom. He had needed to go to the bathroom, but then he had to go over to the other bathroom, and he didn't make it there. So That sucked. It really, really sucked seeing this. And then I still wasn't affected by this. I still didn't really have a mental thought. I don't think I could actually grasp this. I'm potentially watching my father deteriorate until he died. Like, I don't think my brain could process that. It was a little too much. So, he mainly just stayed in bed all day. That was it. But then, like, I don't know. I wasn't very aware of exactly what was going on until we had to do some of the work. We had to take this whole cat litter. It was called a cat genie, and it was a lot of work. It would always break constantly. So finally we got rid of it, and my dad was out there. He asked me to get his sunglasses and a chair, and he just sat out there with glasses on and was just sitting there instructing us on what to do. But when he was going out there, he had a short sleeve shirt on, and that was the first time that I had seen his arms. His skin was basically hanging off because of how minimal of bone he had. It was very, very depressing. It was so sad seeing, like, oh my god, my dad's actually, like, it almost looks like he's starving. And that's what was happening because of the chemo. Everything he ate, he threw up. He couldn't control it. He would eat little bites of things because his mouth was so dry that he had cuts everywhere. He couldn't, it was like basically every time he tried to eat, it was like eating broken glass. That's how much it hurt. So he refused to eat. And that had gone on. We would give him Gatorades and drinks like stuff like that, because he had finally, after the chemo had worn off, like, it wasn't worn off, but he didn't have that needle in him anymore. So he could drink cold stuff anymore. Or again, like, he could drink refrigerated stuff. So that was good. But he just seemed like so depressed. And then once he actually got off the chemo, he actually like seemed to have a personality again. And that made me super happy. But I could tell from these past few years, because everything he loved to do, because he had pulmonary hypertension, which is a heart and lung disease, he was on his 8th year of it. And most people die from it at 5 years. Actually, almost everybody has died from it after 5 years of having it, and he had it for 8 years. He was terminally ill. But at that point, we just joked about him being terminal, because he was like, it almost seemed like he didn't even have it. The only thing was really, like, he couldn't, like, run or anything. He would get really winded because half of his heart was enlarged. And that was what was also scary. It's like he has cancer and it's getting really bad, but at the same time, he could have a heart attack from this heart and lung disease at any time. I remember my mom telling me that every time she went into the room when he was lying down, she just hoped he was not there anymore. She hoped that he just had passed away, because it was so bad watching him suffer this much. It's like, if you're gonna take him. Don't let him suffer. That's like the worst thing that could possibly happen. It's like, would you rather have just immediately died, or would you have rather, like, burned in a fire and felt that pain before dying? It's like, you just want to immediately die. You don't want to have any suffering. It's the worst thing. And so his skin started to turn yellow, like, really bad. His hair just kind of seemed all, like, almost like he was losing it, but at the same time, like, he wasn't. Yeah, he couldn't eat anything. And he was, like, on a week. He had not eaten in a week. And I could see how many pounds he had lost and how weak he was. And then, like, for 3 days in a row, they went to the ER, and they were gone for, like, 7 to 8 hours each, because he was just in the ER doing all this stuff. And he was in the ER, and he was, like, vomiting all over the floor, like, like shitting himself and peeing, and he couldn't control it. It's like the most embarrassing thing. Is literally him just being destroyed by this. And the doctor had come out and had told him, "You are dying. We are just going to make your last days comfortable. Make them fine for you so that you do not have to suffer for these last days of your life." So he had gotten home because he had to stay overnight. And I remember that was one of the first times, like, I was just crying so much because I woke up in the morning and I always go out there and I always see him. You know, he's always there drinking coffee, watching TV or something. But this time he just wasn't there, and I knew. I was like, he's dying. I don't know how much time I have left with him. I can't really spend it with him because he's just half of a person at this point because of how much the chemo had destroyed him. If he had never taken that chemo, he would still be here. But he got back and he was kind of fine. I always had to clean up the bathroom and stuff and make it nice for him. Always clean up his clothes and stuff, which most of the time had like feces in it. It's like, it was really bad. So the days went on. Everything was just about as bad as that. And then we realized he didn't have any body heat because of everything, and so we always had to cover him up with so much stuff, electric blankets, all of this stuff. And he was losing oxygen as well. His body was like kind of starting to shut down because he had not eaten in a while. And it was really bad. And then we had somebody come in with an oxygen tank or whatever and put it down, and I didn't really see too much of it. I didn't really know exactly what it did or how it worked, but he had an oxygen tank in there because he was starting to lose oxygen, couldn't breathe very much, and he always like seemed like it was such a struggle for him to say like 2 words without just like grasping for air or something like that. It was so bad. He was so weak. And so I just drowned all that out with games and everything I do here. I always seemed happy every day because I was always with friends and I was never thinking about it. And then he had started to become delirious. So I was just here, and my mom had called me in saying, quick, he had fallen over again because he had tried to get out of bed. Now at this point, his leg, and his entire leg, was bloated. Like, it was just enlarged. It was all purple and yellow. It's like when you see like a lip of somebody who was like stung by a bee or something. How it's just enlarged. That's his entire leg, so he couldn't move it. And so my mom, after that, I guess, and also before this, so I'm forgetting everything because this is just like a lot for me to talk about. But he had tried to get up and change the TV, and he had fallen over, and he had hit his head on the wall and made a huge hole in the wall. My mom had come in yelling at me saying, "Why is there a hole next to the backyard door?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You did something." And then I was like, "I've not been out of the garage since you left." And she's like, "Well, then it was Dad. Did he fall and hit his elbow on the wall?" And she got really mad at me because I was always in here. I was never out there listening for stuff to happen. And I was like, I can't hear anything. I always have one headset off, though, because I want to be able to hear if something goes wrong. And then back to more present time. He 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 was just nothing at that point. He was just in bed, and my mom always had to help him. She had to put the blanket over him, tuck him in, because he was too weak to stand up or lift his body. Because that's how, he couldn't even lift his own body. That's how weak he was. And then we had helped him back in to bed as he fell over, because we had to help him up. And that's when I first realized that me and my mom both were going to have such a hard trouble if he falls over again. If he tries this again, we might not be able to get him up. And so I had stayed in my room until around the next day when we needed to help him. This was also before the falling over. But, or no, it might have been the day before. I had helped him. We had to get him into the shower or a bath. So we had him, we had to get him into the bath, and when he had gotten out, he put on his pants or whatever, and he just looked into the mirror, and I was right next to him. He looked into the mirror and he said, "Wow, what a mess." Because he had looked at himself. He was just bone. That's all he was. He was literally as skinny as somebody that you would see pictures of in a concentration camp. Something like that. And I'm not trying to make a mean joke about that. No, that's literally what it was. He was as skinny as them because they had been starved. So they were just bone as well. My dad literally basically had nothing left. His belly was huge because every drip of water he drank literally just went down there, nowhere else. So he had been starving for about 2, almost 3 weeks now. And I stayed by the door, and I always checked on him, and then we got him back into bed. And now back to the day where he fell over. So we got him back into bed. And immediately my mom ran out and said, "We need to get phone numbers of neighbors, because we're going to need the help if he does this again. If he falls over again, I don't think me and you can pick him up." So she got our next door neighbor's phone number, and we've known him for a while. His name is Jeff. My parents were really good friends with him. And still are. My mom's still good friends with him. And then Jeff had gone somebody else. I forgot his name. I think it was Charles or something. So they both said, "No matter what time it is, if you need us, call us." So, then I was just in my room, and I was always hearing. I always made sure to make sure nothing was going on, and then I heard him start to groan or something. So I went in there, and he was trying to get out of bed again. So I had called my mom, and we both helped him back into bed, and we told him, "You can't get out of bed. You just can't. You can't walk until we get you something. You can't." So that entire night, from 5 to 2 in the morning, we were just there on and off. I had to always get my chair from my desk or whatever and bring it in there, because he would try to get out to go to the bathroom or something. And then we would have to put him in the chair and wheel him over to the bed and then get him back in. And he was always, no matter what state he was in, he was always so funny. We had got him to the bathroom, and he was going to the bathroom, and he just looks at the door of the bathroom and just goes, "You need a new door." He was always about fixing everything and about making everything perfect. And then on and off, we would just help him back into bed because he would try to get out, and it was so sad because we had gotten him onto the little bench next to my mom's bed, and he was getting ready to get into the chair, but just looking at him, he was looking around everywhere. He was completely yellow. he couldn't keep his eyes open. His hair was all messed up. You could just tell, like, he literally looked like an undead person. He looked like he was just like a zombie. Like, his eyes would roll back, like he was looking around like, I can't do this. He was shaking because he was scared to get up, because he knew that if he got up, he was going to fall over. So we had to help him into the chair, and while he's doing that, he almost fell over again. We got him into the chair, we got him back into the bed. 2 minutes later, he tries to get out again, and we get him back on the bench, and my mom says, where are you trying to go? What are you trying to do? You can't get out of bed. And he was like, I need to go. I need to get ready for work. And he was like completely delirious. He didn't know what he was doing. And so we got him back into bed finally. And I was like, love you. And he couldn't say it because I don't think he could really hear us. At this point, I think truly it was just his brain or his body trying to survive on its own. Because I feel like, and I'm hoping this is what it was, is that his soul had already left him. His soul was already going up to heaven, and it was just him. It wasn't really him, but it was his body trying to do everything to survive. Because he couldn't talk, he couldn't hear us, couldn't do anything. So by the time it's around 2 a.m., finally, I said, because my mom was terrified, she's like, we can't go to sleep. What if he does this in the middle of the night? And this is the worst night. I don't think there's going to be a worse night in my entire life than this one. I said, let's wait 30 minutes. If he doesn't get out of bed, let's just go to sleep. So finally 30 minutes passes and he hasn't gotten out, because we had made him a little fortress, all these pillows on all sides, buried him in blankets so he wouldn't try to get out, and then kind of moved the bed towards the wall so he wouldn't try to get out, because he was always trying to get off the bed, but if there's a wall there, he couldn't. And finally we just went to sleep, and I was like, it's good, all I have to do is just wait until 10. I'm gonna wake up at like 10 in the morning and everything's gonna be fine, because that's always how it was. It's like, if anything's bad, just go to sleep, and when you wake up, it'll probably be better. It's kind of a selfish thing to do, because you're just like allowing everybody else to do everything for you while you sleep. But we both went to sleep, and then I had woken up at 4 in the morning, and I do not have these nights very often, but sometimes I will wake up in the middle of the night and have to go to the bathroom, and it'll be like I'm walking out of my room, I'll go to the bathroom, I'll come back, but at the same time, I'm so tired that I'm still like technically dreaming. I feel like I'm dreaming in my head as I'm walking back. All my thoughts are focused on whatever I was dreaming. And then I had gone back to bed, and I hear the moaning again. I heard my dad groaning. And so I went in there, and he was completely just trying to like get off the bed. His entire body was like completely like just flat out, and his legs were kind of off the bed, and he was trying to pull himself up, but he couldn't do that. And I actually think he was doing that for over an hour. I think he was trying to get out of bed for an hour, but he was too weak. So I had called my mom, and she would not wake up, and I was freaking out. So finally I woke her up, and we got in there, and he had like kind of just slid off the bed onto the floor. And I feel like if I wasn't such a fucking pussy, I would have actually grabbed his legs and pulled him back onto the bed, and that would have been so much better, but he had fallen off. So we got a pillow, we put it on there, and we called Jeff. It's 4 in the morning, we get him over there, and he helped lift my dad up onto the bed, and finally we went back to sleep. Everything was fine. It was about 5 in the morning, and I went to sleep, and I woke up at 10. So there was a nurse there. There was like a home nurse there, and she was in the room the entire time. My uncle, my grandparents, and my sister and her boyfriend were coming over. And finally, because my uncle had won a lawsuit with his company and gotten $5 million or somewhere around that, so he's a millionaire. So to get my dad to a hospice, which a hospice is a hospital that you go to for care until you die. Like, it's for people that are dying, but just to get the proper care until they finally pass away. And we needed this because I was not going to go through that night again. There's no way I'm going to do that. My dad's completely delirious. He can't talk anymore. He can't do anything. And I just remember going into the garage and thinking everything was fine. I was like, he's going to be in the hospice for a few more days until he passes. Everybody's going to go be able to visit him and stuff like that. And I was playing my game, and then I hear my mom crying, but it was like a different type of cry. It was like a hysterical cry, like a really, really, you knew something was fucked up. The nurse had come out and said, "It's happening." My dad was about, like, he was literally in the next, like, 15 seconds, he was going to die. So I had come in, and my mom's like, we should go in there for his last few seconds or minutes of life. We should be with him. That's where he should be, in his home with his family before he passes away. By the time we got in there, the nurse said that he wasn't breathing. And looking at him, he looked like he was in so much pain when he died. But just seeing him on the bed with no skin, his arms up, and it was horrible, because just a few minutes before I had gone to the bathroom and I heard him, he was just gurgling, like he couldn't breathe properly because he had like no oxygen left in him, no power left in him. And I remember just seeing him, and then my mom ran out and screamed as loud as I've ever heard her scream, and saying, "Thank God, finally. He has finally passed away. He's not in any more pain." Because that was literally the best thing, and I was freaking out. This is the first time I've really ever truly broken down in front of people, or just really cried in front of people. And I remember running into the garage and just tweeting it out. Because, and it sounds like a weird thing to do right after your father passes away, but it's really the only thing I thought to do, is to go on Twitter and just write it out and try to accept it. So I wrote it out, and it wasn't more of a tweet to let people know, but it was more of just, I didn't even think of it as a tweet. I could have done it on Notepad. Just write it out and read it back and just let out all my thoughts about it and just read it back. I read that tweet over so many times, and it was so sad. It was devastating. My mom went to call my sister as she was on her way here to tell her, your father's passed away. But the only thing is that she was driving, so we waited until she got here, and I remember her and her boyfriend Jimmy were in the room with him. They had covered him up with a blanket. Not her, but somebody else had covered them with a blanket. And we just stayed in there talking about stories next to him. Just looking at him, thinking about, like, all the good times with him and how nice he was. And it's weird to see somebody that you looked up to and that you had the most experiences shared with, for your entire life. Since I was born until now, all I knew was him, my mom, my sister, and obviously friends and stuff like that. But it was mainly him, because when I skated, he was always there. He even tried to make a brand for me in skating and stuff. He was so into it, and he was just such a nice person. So just sitting there, it was like unreal. Like, I couldn't believe that I was actually looking at my dad, but at the same time, it wasn't him anymore. Now, I'm 100% convinced that his soul had left his body the night before. When he had started to get out of bed, that's when it was. Because I could tell he couldn't talk, he couldn't hear. We would ask him questions, but he wouldn't know. He just couldn't do anything. He was just like a body. That was it. It's like when the tail of a lizard comes off and it's still moving around. That's kind of like what it was. It didn't have a soul in it. It didn't have anything. It was just moving. That's all it was. Until my dad had died. So later on, the first thing I did was I was like, I need to get my mind off of this. I need to calm down. So I just got on my game, and that's all I did. Was just play my game and try to get past what was happening right now and deal with it at a later time. And I remember coming out and seeing them take his body away on the stretcher and in a body bag and stuff. And it was just, I kind of felt like weird because I had been over the crying part of it. Like I was still like thinking like, oh my god, my dad actually just died. But I was out there and I wasn't crying. I mean, my grandparents were, but I was just there just kind of looking at it, looking confused. To the people that were taking his body away, like, they said sorry for your loss and stuff like that, but they probably thought, like, that kid's not emotionally disturbed by this. Even though I was on so many levels. But the first stage of grief is denial. And I think I'm finally getting over denial. Because the past 2 days now, I have been just constantly, just the thought of not having my dad here anymore. Not seeing him walk in after work and greet me and, make all these jokes when I would come out. Like, yeah, and then also a certain part of me, it's like, did I actually play fucking video games? Fucking video games the entire time my dad was dying. But at the same time, I think he kind of understood, He knew his son was so indulged in this, but at the same time, I don't think, he would necessarily wanted me to be with him at all times because I couldn't take it. I would have panic attacks all the time. I would start to freak out if I was next to him all the time. Just seeing him there, just depressed, sad and stuff, that would have killed me. That would have just destroyed me. I would have been scarred. Completely scarred. But, yeah. It's just like I remember on Christmas Day when we had gotten home from from my uncle's house. He had gotten me a drone for Christmas, and I remember my mom saying that my dad wanted to, play with drones and stuff or whatever, so I bring it in there. I was like, hey dad, look at what I got. And he had told me like he's like, yeah, tomorrow we can go outside and play with it. We can go to like a big park or something, play with it. And he was trying to muster all the strength he had to say that in the most normal voice. And I knew it wasn't going to happen because he couldn't walk. But yeah, now every time, it's still in my room. Every time I'll be up at like 3 a.m. I'll look at it and I will start breaking down because of how just sad that was. Just him, telling his son, yeah, we'll be able to play with it tomorrow. Even though he his body was shutting down. And he couldn't do anything. So, yeah. That's what happened in the span of 2 months. That's how fast life can just end for you. Like, life is something people take granted of, or just like advantage of, and just take it for granted all the fucking time. Because they don't really understand that it could just be gone in a second. You could just be gone. So, yeah, it was just like something so precious, and people don't get that. And this entire community is just full of like, people my age, people like 13 years old, just telling everyone they dislike to get cancer and stuff like that. It's like if you've actually listened to every single part of this, then you would know like how bad it truly is. This is literally what cancer is. You probably just say get cancer because you don't understand it fully. You just see things about it. And I mean, I'm not even the one that went through it. I'm just the one that saw my own father go through it. And so that's why it fucks me up when people get mad out of nowhere and say fucked up shit. And yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna be fine for a few years or something. I'll probably get over it, you know. But yeah, this has been my dad's story. That's what happened in the span of 2 months. It shouldn't have ever happened this fast. Because every memory I have of him that's recent is like literally not even 3 months ago. And he's already dead. He's already gone. Like, because I remember when he first got it, I was just thinking, I'm like, he'll be good. He'll be fine. Nothing's really gonna happen. I'm like thinking, what's like really gonna happen? And it's 2018 is here. He's gone as well. So yeah, that's literally the worst end to a year ever, is to have your dad die 2 days before 2018 and stuff like that. If he had survived one more day, he would have been diagnosed on October 31st and died exactly 2 months later. Yeah. Well, if you've actually listened to this entire thing, I really want to thank you. I think everybody needs to hear this because it's not a joke. Joking about cancer is so fucking horrible because you have to think, what if everything I just told you happened to you? Or happened to somebody that you had told to get cancer? Because when you grow up, you're gonna get out of this state no matter what. You're gonna start to have regrets. You're gonna start to feel more. You're gonna have more maturity, and you're gonna start to realize like, oh my god, I was telling people to get like cancer to kill themselves. It's like, what if they actually did? It's a horrible thing. So yeah, that's the story.